Joseph, for the moment, I'm here with you. You're here with me. What is your question?
Well, thank you so much, Chris. I have to admit I'm a little nervous, so I'm just going to, kind of first say to Chris, I really did enjoy your Mormon Stories interview. That was great.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It was a lot of fun to do. John Dellen, great guy.
I've not done a Mormon Stories. That's wow.
So that was actually my question. Why haven't you? Right. So that surprises me. I'm currently living in Mapleton, Utah. So during the quarantine, it was right around, I think it was the day that earthquake happened in Magna, Utah. That was the day that I found your podcast in my YouTube queue, and so I started watching, and it's kind of been what I've been watching on a daily basis through the quarantine. So, like, being able to, first of all, thank you for all the work that you've done, and I really do appreciate the people on other channels like God is Gray. That was a treasure. So
cool. Yeah.
Anyway, cool. Thank you for that. And my question for you, I'm gay. I left the church in 2010, and 2 years ago I got rebaptized. And during that self-excommunication, I believe that I was a good faith materialist. And I realized that for whatever reason, nature and nurture and all of that, like I couldn't really function the way I wanted to as a materialist. So I do believe that the faith I have is a choice. It's not a choice based on evidence. It is a choice based on personal preference and feeling. So I'm just going to... so I wouldn't argue that point. To be honest, I actually put together quite a few videos in a playlist that they may not answer the issues in the CES letter point by point, but the main issues that I feel are deal breakers or were for me when I left the church have now been resolved, but I still am conflicted, and I did become inactive a year into my return to church. So,
Joseph, can I ask you a question about the CES letter thing you just said? So
yeah,
when you say that they've been resolved, do you mean that you had a set of beliefs that the CES letter challenged, then somebody answered those challenges to your satisfaction, but then beyond that, in the same way that you allowed the CES letter to scrutinize your past beliefs, did you go and scrutinize the answers to those? And the reason why I ask this is I've gone through a lot of the apologetics of the CES letters, and most of them are built on rewriting history and changing what the things in the past were. So, for example, when you talk about one of the apologetics is regarding the DNA of Jews not showing up in Native Americans. And so they've now changed that to, well, no, the Lamanites were actually a different set of people that lived on the continent that were separate from the ancestors of the Native Americans. But if you actually go and you look throughout the history of the church, that is not the revelations Joseph Smith got. That was not what the prophets received as revelation. They were talking about ancient Mayan structures as being ancient Mormon structures, frankly. And so it's a rewriting where it's kind of like I mentioned with the flat earth model. It answers the one question if you rewrite it. However, it is not compatible with if you take the model together as a whole. These things fall apart together. So that's why I'm asking this question about the apologetics you've now seen done in response to the CES letter. Have you done the same amount of scrutinizing of those answers as you did to the CES letter itself to get to those answers?
Well, thank you for that question. So, what, and that's why I felt impressed to call in, because not to call your attention to this particular playlist of responses to the CS issues. You know, these were concerns that I found just reading the church approved materials before the CES letter, I believe, was published. And so I found the apologetics, you know, in response to these very clear and appropriate questions absolutely unsatisfying. My personal resolution for these particular problems with truth claims and historicity, you know, for me it is literal, but I have in that playlist to establish a completely different foundational basis for the fulfillment, different geography, different everything. So it is something I take seriously and literal, but I get no help from the Mormon apologists. They're trying to tell me that animals are different species, that obsidian is steel. It's very frustrating.
Right. Horses are tapirs, and now they're back to horses because they might have found some horses in a small area, but they still can't find the millions of horses and the chariots. And the fact of the matter, I mean, the biggest thing that I would point to, and then we'll get to your original question, it's very clear to everybody in the anthropology field that isn't Mormon that it's not just that the Book of Mormon isn't true, that it's essentially impossible for it to be true. Not just maybe we'll find out. We're talking about millions, a battle with millions of people with steel, and we can't find a single one. Meanwhile, when other books give context and give clues about where things happen, we have gone and found societies of dozens of people from hundreds to thousands of years ago because of text and things that were written about them and other contextual clues. And it didn't take much to find them. And yet we can't find the remnants of the bloodiest battle that ever happened on the American continent. It would be like not being able to find where Gettysburg happened at this point. And so these are the things where I just go, it's not just that the best reason to not believe in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is simply because it's not true. But separate from that, there are personal reasons to individuals that are likely better reasons for those individual people. And I think that the question you called in about is related to one of those. So do you want to relay that question?
Right. So the question that I have is that under the right circumstances, could an LGBT person, in your opinion, benefit or flourish under the current policies and procedures of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints?
Perhaps if they were totally asexual and that never changed for them, then they could at least flourish and be accepted if the local community was okay. Remember that you will not be a worthy member of the church if you act out, perform, whatever phrase you want, your sexuality in any way that does not conform, not just sexuality, but even gender, with being cis and straight. You won't be able to participate in significant portions of the church. Those things are not insignificant either, because remember, one of the big social repercussions in the church is denial of sacrament, which happens in a public forum, and everyone notices who waves the hand to say, "Don't give me the sacrament."
Yeah.
And so even further than that, you do not get to act out your sexuality to its, what for many people who are not asexual, like myself, quite the opposite. My sexuality to feel fulfilled requires me to have sex. And if you do that at all, there is no version of, you might find a local bishop who puts it off longer and longer because they're very compassionate. But the moment you as a queer person have sex, even if you are married, you are now worthy of excommunication from the church. So no, I don't think, first of all, I don't think the church is a safe place for straight cis people either. But I think it is an especially hostile environment. And if anything, I worry about them tokenizing the people who are queer and are quote unquote making it work or appearing to flourish, to try and bring in the people who it just couldn't work for. And so I don't just describe the church as non-compatible. I think it is an abusive place for any queer person, and frankly, any. I mean, really, it's to a different extent, it's abusive to anybody. But if you're a straight white cis man, things work out real great for you. Everybody else, it's much more much worse. So no, at present, do I think it is possible. That said, the Mormon Church has a repetitive history of being 2 to 3 decades behind the rest of the world. So we're probably only another decade away from them being more universally queer accepting, but it's not today.
I agree. As a gay man, and just to, draw your attention, if you do have time, to this hashtag Dear Mr. Atheist on my personal YouTube account. But
sure.
What I try to attempt in multiple videos is to build a queer theory of Christianity that I do believe personally, because it helps me be a believer that there was a queer relationship at the heart of the gospel. And I believe that that's actually what was communicated in the Da Vinci's Last Supper, that it's John and Jesus, and that Da Vinci was actually queer himself, if that makes sense, I guess.
I've heard lots of theories about Christ himself being queer, and it's not that hard to conceptualize that this guy who told 12 dudes to leave their wives and hang out with them alone all the time. But I don't want to say it's a fact. I try to withhold belief until I have a adequate reason for it. But it's not hard to conceptualize such a thing. I guess I think
there you go. I mean.
I guess the question at the end of the day is, why do you feel, because you said it helps you believe, why do you feel a need to believe in Christianity? Why are you looking for things to help you believe in Christianity, as opposed to, would it be okay to step back from all of it and go, you know what, I'm going to reset from zero. The facts will take me where they may, and I'm going to do my best, because we can't really say we're not going to favor one thing or another, but we're going to do our best to try and identify our biases and hopefully counter them. Is that an option for you?
The thing is, I came to this conclusion because during my time as a materialist, I had all of the opportunity to try and optimize my experience as a homosexual man at an unprecedented point in rights. But I was, as a materialist, haunted by the relationship I thought I had with Jesus Christ. It had been very real for me, but because of the issues that I originally couldn't resolve, and I had to mourn that, and I felt like I would never be able to believe in something like Jesus Christ. And I did try to find replacements, but because I had built up my expectations so high, I mean, we are told to do that, like, from primary. So, like, as a 5-year-old, like, I really felt like I wanted to return to Jesus Christ, and now it's like Dorothy, like, there's no place like home, like just by kind of surrendering to it. I feel that staying close to my Orthodox family, my parents and siblings in Utah, that I can see how the community comes together to preserve this belief in Jesus Christ, the same Jesus in the Book of Mormon, because we do want him to return. And I feel like I won't be happy if I think of death as anything other than being reunited with him.
It's one of those things that I'm not going to pretend going from Mormonism to atheism is smooth and you feel relieved a bunch. I mean, it's nice to stop feeling guilty about having sex, but certainly there are cycles of guilt. There are cycles of reliance on this old concept of, I never grieved when my first grandfather died because I believed so thoroughly in what had happened to him that, first of all, I basically felt like now there was a one-sided phone call he could never hang up on. Now he has to listen to me anytime I want him to. And second, I felt I was going to see him again. So I maybe grieved the like, we'll never do this together again, but not his actual death. And so it's one of those things where it's like, you think about the good versus the bad, and that sounds to a lot of people who are in belief like a good thing. Like, I got a lot of comfort and didn't have to go through that terrible dark time. Now that I've gone through those terrible dark times, and now that I'm on the other side of it, I can't stand the thought of that. To me, it is a negative thing. The idea that I lost my grandfather and didn't bother grieving him, to me, is actually it's an offensive concept. And so it's one of those things where I totally get the obstructions of, to go from here to there would be so hard and so devastating. I think it's worth it because I think it is worth believing as many true things as possible and as many false and as few false things as possible. And I think that the same crisis that you described to us to me, it definitely means a lot, and I understand it. But I also recognize this is a crisis Baptists have. This is a crisis Muslims have. This is a crisis Hindus have. This is a crisis Lutherans have. This is a crisis anybody of any religion who is deep in a culture of their religion, who then basically realizes why it's wrong, will feel that pull back, and many of them will pull back. The crisis itself does not indicate whether or not there is truth or not. We have to find out what outside of that deeply emotional experience is the thing that will point to us whether or not the church is true or not. And so that's why I asked that first question. Were you just comforted that the CES letter had some answers, or that it had true answers? Because when you're feeling that pull back, any answer feels good enough. And so that's more something I want you to think about here, not necessarily basically follow up with me on. I want to give Chris a chance to give his thoughts as well. But then unfortunately, it does look like I need to wrap this up. Only like 5 minutes early, it looks like we're going, but I have a family thing I need to attend to.
Cool. I don't have a lot to contribute to this except to say that you're not, in the minority in going back to or looking back to previous belief systems or structures for security and safety and comfort, because if I'm understanding what you're saying correctly, because that's 80% of people who come out of groups, will go back in some form or hook up with another group. I can only sort of throw out there, I have a question. In this time period that you've been on this quest, have you read widely of other philosophies in any way?
I actually, my sister influenced me with Kundalini yoga, and so you were mentioning past lives and auditing, and I guess going clear, and so like past lives, that idea, the idea that maybe trans people are communicating something in a materialist age, that they are this person, the gender they claim because their spirit is, I mean, that's the kind of stuff that I use to reconcile, I don't know, but so thank you so much, Jimmy and Chris, and then Chris, I mean, not that you have to answer to me, I'll be off the line. Do you believe in aliens?
I believe that the probability of life off of planet Earth developing independently is extraordinarily high, to the point that I think it's a certainty, just from the mathematics of it. In an infinite universe, anything is possible. So, yes, I do believe in alien life. I do not believe in Scientology's cosmology, though.
Yeah, no, yeah. Yeah, remember, Chris is a former Scientologist. I'm not a.
That's right.
I feel very, very similarly. It seems very likely, even if we're the only planet in our entire galaxy with life, if that's the rate of life, which I don't remember the number of stars we have in our galaxy, but let's say it's 1 billion. Even if 1 in 1 billion in a galaxy tend to have life, that's still a lot of life in the universe. So I tend to feel the same way.
Thank you both so much.
Thank you, Joseph.
Absolutely.
Bye-bye.
Wow.
Yeah. Good last call. A lot of food for thought, I hope, for a lot of people. Yeah, that's why when he was bringing up the sort of the queer issues, it's one of those things where it's like the best universal reason to not believe in Mormonism is because it's not true. But for an individual who is themselves queer, it's to avoid the abuse you're going to receive if you do try to force yourself and attend. So that's why I was trying to sort of, I guess, create a contrast, differentiate between the individual versus the universal reason.
Yeah.
But anyway, that is it.
Points. I mean, it's a destructive cult for a reason. It's abusive.
Yeah. Yeah, you know? Absolutely. Absolutely. Hey, thanks for checking out this clip for The Line. While you're here, hit that like button, hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and then share this with that bitter uncle of yours who loves talking about the good old days.